day. Makes me wanna holler, go away. I need more peace and hope and love. Where do I find it in this crazy old world? I need strategies, strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab. Strategies for living radio. Every time I listen, Lauren and David share strategies for living, and it makes me aware. I got strategies for living, strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab. Strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab.
Oh, yeah, you know, we need them. We need strategies. We need strategies for living. Welcome, folks, into this edition of Strategies for Living on 101.7 FM and 710 Keel. I'm Dr. David McMillan. She is psychotherapist, PLPC Lauren Leon McMillan.
That's me.
You know what we don't talk enough about? I'm going to surprise. I may surprise you, and I may surprise a lot of people.
Okay.
When I say what I'm going to say.
Go ahead.
We don't talk enough about grief.
I agree full-heartedly.
You know, and I know that may sound weird to people. I know it.
Yeah.
I know it does. But hear me out. You know, from birth to death, life is a series of things that we have to give up. And grieving is the process through which we're able to move through that, right?
Absolutely.
We are so blessed. You could say lucky, whatever you want to say. Put whatever you want to in
I'm
this.
excited.
I'm saying lucky and blessed to have our life strategist today, because he's one of
the pioneers.
He really is. He's David Kessler, and he's actually got a new book and a new workbook called Finding Meaning: The Sixth Stage of Grief. Most of us are familiar, at least, with the stages of grief.
Right.
And I don't even like to call them stages, but we'll talk about that later. But Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross brought us these stages of death and dying, which then became the stages of grief.
Right.
And our life strategist today actually worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
So cool.
It is cool. And he worked with people like Louise Hay and all that. We'll give him his entire introduction. But let me tell you this. We are in for a treat today. We have some great life strategists here on Strategies for Living. But I'm really looking forward to today. And I hope you are too.
I know I am.
Folks, thank you. Thank you for being here today with us on Strategies for Living. And you're going to learn a lot from international grief expert David Kessler. And, we can do this. We can do this each and every day here on the radio, because we've got wonderful sponsors. The Robinson Film Center and Azalea Cleaners and Pintail Roofing
Roof, roof.
and Learning RX and the Balanced Life Wellness Center. We're coming back. We're going to meet our life strategist, David Kessler. We're going to talk about his brand new book and workbook, Finding Meaning: The Sixth Stage of Grief. That's today here on Strategies. Stay with us.
Hi, this is Jay Merle for Pintail Roofing. Let's talk about quality. When you hire Pintail to build your roof, here's what you can expect. Quality and quality control are the most important concerns for us at Pintail, and you need to know that Pintail stands tall with swift and professional performance on any warranty call. This is our most important policy. And remember, we're your neighbors. We'll be here for you for the long haul. Our family's lived here for over 100 years, and we aren't going anywhere. On the commercial side of Pintail's business, our fluid-applied roofing solutions can save thousands of dollars over conventional commercial roofing options. Call Pintail at 226-ROOF for a free inspection of your home or commercial building. That's 226-7663. Pintail Roofing. What's the condition of your roof?
And welcome into 101.7 FM 710 Keel. Welcome into Strategies for Living. Lauren Leon McMillan, David McMillan. Let's welcome in David Kessler. He is one of the world's foremost experts on grief and loss. His experience with thousands of people on the edge of life and death has taught him the secrets to living a happy and fulfilled life, even after life's tragedies. He's the author of 6 books, including his latest bestseller, Finding Meaning, the 6th Stage of Grief. He's co-authored 2 books with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Life Lessons and Own Grief. And he's also co-authored a book with Louise Hay. I'm jealous already, but I'm going to stop talking about that and welcome in David Kessler. David, welcome to Strategies.
Welcome.
Oh, so nice to be with you both and everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work that you're doing. And wow, I mean, we can go so many places, but we only have an hour, so I'm going to pack as many questions as I can for you. We're going to work you hard as a life strategist today, David.
All right. Bring it on.
All right, so the sick, we a lot of people are familiar with the 5 stages, right? Bargaining, denial, anger, depression, acceptance. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in her Stages of Death and Dying gave us those. I even hate to call them stages because in the years working with clients, stage implies, okay, I'm through this, now I'm up to here. And I think we bounce. At least that's, what my observation has been. But I was so excited when I heard about your new book, The 6th, Finding Meaning, the 6th Stage of Grief. How did this come to be? How did this bubble up within you to say we need a 6th stage?
Sure. Well, I had the privilege of knowing and working with Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and co-authoring 2 books with her. And I was lucky enough to help her formally adapt her stages of dying, her stages of grief. And I always hear her whispering in my ear, just like you said, tell everyone the stages aren't linear.
Yeah.
There's no neat way to do grief. Grief is a very messy concept.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I always put that out front. So I was privileged to do 2 books with her, as you mentioned, 1 book with Louise Hay, and I've done this work for decades. And then 8 years ago, my younger son, David, died accidentally out of the blue.
Oh, David.
And it was as brutal as anyone would think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And as I went through that process, I had to take my own medicine. I've been telling people for years, go to grief counseling, go to grief groups, read books on grief. And I handed that advice out like it was candy.
Yeah.
And I found myself needing to go to a grief group that literally my books were on the table 5 feet away. And I couldn't say, that's me, I'm the author. I had to be the dad.
Right.
And I went to a grief counselor. And even after decades of teaching therapists and going through this work and helping people with their own grief, I had to just do the work myself. And as you can imagine, there was that expert in the background of my mind that was like, are you going to go through what's your process going to be like? And sure enough, I was like, yeah, I'm in denial. I can't believe he's gone. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm angry. Yeah, I'm bargaining the what ifs. Yep, I'm sad with depression.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm going to have to deal with acceptance someday. And as I began to wrestle with this idea of acceptance, it was like, well, that can't be it. That's not enough. What? I just accept it and I'm done? No. I mean, Kubler-Ross and I had talked about, there's no finality to acceptance, but I knew I wanted more.
Yeah.
And as I started studying, I thought about meaning. And I wondered, meaning connected with some and not with others. And the first thing I realized about is meaning is not in the horrible event that happened.
Mm-hmm.
There's no meaning in a death of a child or a murder or a death of a parent or
No.
sibling or
Right.
spouse.
No. No.
The meaning is in us. It's what we do after the tragedy.
Mm.
And I started talking about that eventually with my publisher, who also publishes Kubler-Ross's book. And they said, well, this is the sixth stage. And I said, oh, I don't know if, I don't think I could. The Kubler-Ross family would never allow that. And I was so honored that the Kubler-Ross family and foundation gave me permission to actually add a sixth stage, the stage of meaning. And so that ended up becoming the book that came out a while back. And right now we're in the midst of the workbook just coming out.
Right.
Mm.
Right. And the workbook is excellent. First of all, thank you. Thank you so much for, having the courage to move forward with this and write the book.
And to move through it.
And to move through it yourself.
I think it's very, very cool that we all are benefiting from your finding meaning in your
Well, I
experience.
appreciate that. And I think meaning is meant to be shared.
Mm.
I think meaning is meant to be shared. And one of the other things I explained early on around meaning, we always think meaning is the big event. Oh, what do we have to do? We've got to start a charity. We got to write a book like David. What do we got to do? And I always teach people meaning is found in the small moments. We just have to name them. It doesn't have to be this big thing. Like right now, talking to you two, knowing people are listening who are struggling makes this a really meaningful moment for me.
Yeah. Well,
And just to name that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're honored that, we can be a small little part of the process. And you did hear me say at the beginning of the program, I don't think we talk enough about grief. I don't think we teach children to grieve. And I don't mean to be pessimistic here or a downer, but life is about loss. From birth to death, life is a series of things we have to give up. Starting with, I have to give up being in the womb where everything's warm and I'm taking all my needs are met. And then a horrible thing happens. I'm born. But then going through life, we have to give up things. So grieving is the way we deal with that, isn't it?
And I'll tell you, I often say I'm teaching us what our great-grandparents knew.
Yeah.
They knew how to be with the grieving, with those who are in grief. We live in a very grief-illiterate world. These things seem simple, but no one's talking about them. That's why I think it's so good we're talking about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David, is it, it's got to be, I guess, when you talk about meaning and define it in the context of grief, I get it has to be different for everybody, huh?
Absolutely. Our grief is as unique as our fingerprint because grief, just think about it, we all had different loved ones. And I just also want to mention to folks listening, we often, of course, talk about the grief from a loved one dying, but that's not the only grief out there. I always say it's the death of something. A breakup is the death of the romantic relationship. A divorce is the death of that marriage. A job loss is the death of that job. We have pet loss. Grief occurs in so many ways. So I always like to just mention that for folks.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Would you say, I know we've already talked about the 5 stages themselves aren't linear. Would you say that this finding meaning also is not linear, or is this more of a capstone? In other words,
Capstone's an interesting,
is finding meaning something we do along the way as well, in between?
I think it is further along. I usually say to people, it comes months or even years after.
Hmm.
And the reason why I say that is, when you do your anger, sort of doesn't matter in the process, or your sadness or your denial, and they can all happen in an hour. But I think you can make a mistake of trying to get to meaning too quickly without
Mm.
excavating the pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think you really got to go through the pain first.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
That it does make sense, and it kind of leads me into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, and that is telling the story.
Mhm.
Some people, they get through whatever the loss is, and then I want to get over with it. Why is it important for us to tell the story, whatever the story is of our loss, and how does storytelling help toward finding the meaning?
Yeah, I think because we need our grief witnessed.
Mm.
We need another person to see our pain, to see our love. We need our pain reflected in the eyes of another.
Mm. Yeah. It's reflected in the eyes of another, so it can be reflected back and experienced by us, because that's a key component of living and
Yeah.
relationship, isn't it? That
Right. And
sharing.
I always say, keep in mind the cruelest thing we do in war is kill someone, obviously. The second cruelest thing is put them in isolation.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's interesting to think about, what do we often do in grief? We isolate
We isolate.
ourselves, and we get isolated by others.
Sure.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. We're talking to David Kessler today. His new book is Finding Meaning Workbook, The Sixth Stage of Grief. It's tools for releasing pain, and get this, remembering love. That's beautiful. You can find Finding Meaning, the workbook, as well as the book, any place you buy books, and I hope you will. But stay with us today here on Strategies. David Kessler is our life strategist, and we've got more to learn here on Strategies for Living. Stay right where you are. Hey, let's talk about the Robinson Film Center. I say it a lot. There's no place like the Robinson.
Absolutely, there is not.
617 Texas Street, downtown Shreveport. You've got so much. You got the movies. You got Abby Singer's Bistro on the second floor of RFC, open for lunch and dinner Tuesday through Saturday.
Newly remodeled.
Absolutely. Great menu. RobinsonFilmCenter.org is the way you check it all out. You can go to RobinsonFilmCenter.org at any time and find out what movies are showing. Here's the deal. You want to join the crowd, join the fun, become a member. When you become a member, you become a star. You get discounts on movies, you get concession upgrades, you get bistro deals. RFC, 617 Texas Street in downtown Shreveport. I'll say it again. There's no place like the Robinson.
There is not, and I'm glad we have one right here.
Absolutely. The RobinsonFilmCenter.org.
Reading begins not in the classroom, but in your child's brain. I'm Donisa Walker with Learning RX Shreveport. If your child struggles to read, maybe he or she has trouble focusing or comprehending, Learning RX Shreveport offers a science solution to reading problems, working one-on-one with your child, targeting his or her reading skills. Today, call Learning RX Shreveport. Make an appointment to have your child assessed. I know you want to help your child, so does Learning RX Shreveport.
We all have problems every day. We all need help along the way. We need strategies for living radio.
And welcome back into your little daily dose of radio rehab here on Strategies for Living. Lauren Leon McMillan, David McMillan. We're with David Kessler today. He has written prolifically about grief, and his new book is actually the Finding Meaning Workbook. It's a workbook for his book Finding Meaning. It's Finding Meaning Workbook, the 6th stage of grief, and its tools for releasing pain and remembering love. That's beautiful, David.
Well, thank you very much. You know, people often ask, what's the goal here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it to get over someone? Is it to move on? And I always tell people, no, you know, our loved one is not like a common cold that we recover from or a flu. We don't get over it.
Right.
Rather, we learn to live with it.
Yeah.
The old Willie Nelson, right?
Yeah.
It's not something you get over.
It's something you get through. I love Willie.
Right, right.
All right, so that brings up.
Yeah.
All right, so grief is a form of love.
Reminds me of the Hamlet quote, right?
Yeah.
What is grief but love enduring, or something like
Yeah.
that?
But I think we have to. I think we have to ask you to
Yeah.
earn your life strategist stripes here, David. Elaborate on that a bit, because as people are listening to us, they might be saying, "What?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, grief is a very painful, messy emotion that's unique to us, and it's part of the human experience. And, you know, there's no timeline in grief, but I often do use the marker that I think about early grief as the first 2 years. And people are often surprised at that. If I ask what's early grief, they'll go, I don't know, the first month, first 6 months. I think early grief is the first 2 years.
Wow.
And then we begin to move into a place of releasing that pain throughout that time and beginning just to integrate moments of laughter again and life again and living again. And there's not a clean moment between grieving and living. They happen all together. You know, you have an hour you don't cry, you have a day you don't cry, and you just have more of those times again. And then at a certain point, you know, there's more love than pain, and that's different for everyone.
You know, the workbook. You have really packed. You've really packed this. And I'm going to make a recommendation to listeners because I truly believe what I said. We can't do anything more important in life than learn how to grieve. My strong recommendation to anybody that happens to hear my voice right now is to get a copy of David's newest book and the workbook. And I really don't even care how you do it, which order you do it in. You know, probably if you go to some of the booksellers, they package them up and you can get both of them together. And
well, the truth is they can start with the workbook, so they can start with the newer one. That's completely okay.
Yeah. And there's so much in it, you know, you've got so much here to help people. How could I say this? Begin to get their arms around something as important as dealing with their own grief and loss.
Well, and one of the things I wanted the workbook to be is I wanted it to be as if we're sitting down at your kitchen table and we're just talking about what you're going through and helping you to understand what it is and how you're feeling it and what's going on there.
So much of the workbook is an invitation, isn't it? It's I'm looking at I'm looking at it now and flipping through it, and I'm just picking out. Not that anything that I pick out is more important than anything else in here, because I do think you have it packed full. But for instance, what self-judgment about your grief do you need to forgive yourself for?
Oh boy.
That's a question that you ask people to answer, to write on. And and then how would the kindest person you know tell you to do that? I mean, and that's the whole book has nugget after nugget after nugget of gold.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll tell you the interesting thing is I have deeper, more challenging questions. And I have like little disloyalty checklists. How are you being disloyal in your
Yeah.
grief?
Yeah.
And even the one you talked about, when I say to people, you're judging your grief, they're like, I'm not judging my grief. I don't think grief is bad. And I'll go, right, but you're saying you're backsliding. You should be further along. You're not grieving right. I say, all those are judgments.
Yes, absolutely.
And one of the things that someone said to me that I thought was really interesting is she said, I want you to know I bought the workbook and it's on the shelf. I'm not ready to do it yet.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
And I said, oh, well, thank you so much for that. And I'm just curious, uh, you know, tell me about putting it on the shelf. And she said, I'm not ready to go into the pain.
mm,
Yeah.
mhm,
And I said to her very gently and lovingly, I wish you could put the pain on your shelf along with the workbook.
mm.
But it's an illusion that you put the pain on the shelf. The pain is in you. The workbook will help you release the pain, but the workbook can't get to the pain on the shelf.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep,
Yep.
that's a good point.
That is a very good point.
Mm. And how many of us do that?
Right, right. You know, one of the things I talk about in this book that I studied in my life, and I never thought I would study, is buffaloes.
Mm.
And buffaloes, when they sense a storm
Yes.
coming,
Hmm.
they literally run into the storm
Mhm.
to minimize the time they're in their discomfort.
Hmm.
Us human beings, on the other hand, we run from grief, keeping it behind us for so much of our life.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And how-
Keeping it behind us for
Yeah.
so much of our life.
And just like the storm, it's coming.
It's coming. Yeah. And how much energy does that take?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely there. It's absolutely there. You know, and one of the things I tell people, and I think is the essence of this, is what we run from pursues us, and what we face transforms us.
Ooh.
Mm.
Yeah, he earned his stripes right there.
There you go. You got your certificate coming right now. What
All right.
what role does faith? What role does faith, does spirituality play in the meaning finding, the finding of the meaning? Is it something that is essential for healing, David?
You know, I think faith gives us our cushion that we grieve from. And I think faith comes up in many ways. Like I have an online group,
Mhm.
and we have 26 different groups in my online group. And it's fascinating that, you know, obviously we have death of a mother, death of a father, death of a sibling, death of a parent, death of all those you would expect. And one of the requested groups was folks wanted a faith group.
Mm.
And in that group, it's fascinating. Some people talk about how they're leaning on their faith. Some people are talking about how they're questioning their faith.
Mhm.
Some people are wondering, how did this happen in their faith? Some people are even angry at God. And we talk about, you know, is your God big enough and loving enough
Hmm.
to even hold your anger?
Yeah.
And so it's really an interesting, you know, to see how faith comes up in so many ways.
By the way, that website that you mentioned, is that grief.com?
That's grief.com, absolutely. And they can find so many free resources there, as well as the online group. And there's also a certificate program that I teach every year for therapists and clergy and ministers and coaches. You know, it's interesting. One of the things the clergy will tell me over and over is their training really taught them to be at the bedside with the dying and how to really help people deal with the funeral, but they said they needed a little more support and training in helping people through the grief.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, and of course, I, you know, every minister and priest and rabbi that I've ever come across is well-meaning, but
Absolutely.
sometimes you get the idea that you know, and I think this may come from what you're just saying is, okay, well, hurry along and get back to temple, get back to church, get back to, you know,
Right.
get and
Right.
yeah,
Or, do you end up with the feeling that maybe you didn't pray hard enough?
yeah,
Mm.
That,
yeah,
what went wrong that your loved one died?
yeah,
And it's interesting, and I think the world is changing and that people are wanting their clergy to sort of wrestle a little more with them. It's
mm,
interesting. Years ago, I would work in a hospital, and one of the groups that I was privileged to work with was our clergy and our chaplains. And it's interesting. I remember one of the priests, who would do last rites
Mhm.
at 5 a.m.
yeah,
And then the family would call him in for, last rites. And I would say, the family's wanting last rites. And he would go, well, I did it at 5 a.m. Tell them.
Hmm, hmm,
And,
yeah,
they would say, well, they want to be a part of it. They want to see it.
yeah,
And,
experience it.
it's interesting. He was really up in age and elderly. And I remember him saying to me, God got it the first time. And I said, I understand God got it,
The people
but I
did.
think the family would like to get
To
it.
get it,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's so much here. Finding Meaning Workbook, the 6th Stage of Grief. These are tools from David Kessler. He's the author for releasing pain and remembering love. Check him out at grief.com. But stay with us. We've got more from David Kessler today here on Strategies for Living. Stay with us. Dealing with stress, pain, feel like you're running out of options? When your life is balanced, wellness is a given. True wellness is holistic. It's about the mind, the body, and the spirit, all in balance. Now, there's a place right here in Shreveport that's all about helping us achieve peak mental, emotional, and physical health. The Balanced Life, 117 Kings Highway, right next door to Strawn's. Come see and feel the difference getting your life in balance can be. Many of your friends and neighbors have already learned the difference less stress and pain mean in their lives. You can book a discovery session right now online, thebalancedlife.us. All you've got to lose is stress, pain, or maybe both. Come see and feel for yourself the real difference balanced wellness makes. The Balanced Life Wellness Center, 117 Kings Highway in Shreveport, next door to Strawn's, thebalancedlife.us.
Tune in daily, find the light. Healthy mind and spirits bright. Strategies for living strong. Feel the vibe, it won't go wrong. Body moves and soul align. Catch the rhythm, feel the time. Radio rehab every day. Chase those clouds of gray away. Your daily dose of radio rehab. Lift you up when skies seem drab. Mind and body, spirits free. Living life in harmony.
And welcome back into Strategies for Living here on 101.7 FM, 710 Keel. Lauren and David, along with our life strategist, David Kessler, the author of Finding Meaning Workbook, the 6th Stage of Grief. And it's tools. It's tools for releasing pain and remembering love. And you can check David out at grief.com, and I hope you will. David, I want you to say a little bit about what you were sharing with Lauren and I off air. We want to make sure people
Well,
get the real thing, right?
here's our new modern world. when you have luckily, as I did, and I'm grateful that I had a best-selling book, and then I decided, oh my gosh, I want to expand this and help people to really go through and do the work themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
In our modern world, someone puts out an AI copycat of the workbook. And here's the weird thing about it. You know, like along with Kubler-Ross, I wrote a book called Life Lessons.
Right.
There's probably hundreds of books called Life Lessons.
Mhm.
People can use each other's titles.
Right.
So the
Right.
AI has the exact same title. They even use the same color. The
Man.
only thing that looks different is the author. So that's why I say to folks, go to grief.com to click on the link. Or we also have another site called griefbook.com. Because, you know, people have written to me and say, hey, all of a sudden midway in the book, you quit talking about grief. And I have to go, that isn't me.
Yeah.
That isn't me.
So get the real thing, folks,
Yeah.
and you can
Get the real thing.
You can assure yourself of the real thing by clicking on through grief.com, and you want to do that anyway because
Mm-hmm.
again, there's so many. There's so much resource there that's free for you on grief.com, and you said also griefbook.com, David.
Absolutely. That way, if they want to get to their local Amazon, Barnes and Noble bookseller, they can just grab it there.
You know, you were talking about at the end of last segment the last rites, and it just made me think about the importance of rituals, the importance of ceremonies. You know,
Yeah.
and I took your question away,
You
didn't I?
sure
Yeah.
did. We're too much on the same page here. Go ahead.
Maybe David will counsel us a little bit. I think I'm in trouble, David. I just took her question.
It's all good.
Uh-oh. Well, I'll leave that to you two.
Okay.
Moving through grief here.
You know, they're important, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on your question there.
Oh no.
You know, it's important because it really helps us bookend a life.
Mhm.
And sometimes, like during the pandemic, people who either didn't get a chance to have that ritual at the end of life or rituals
Right.
have had a tougher time. And I can even remember before the pandemic, I would say to someone who was telling me they had such a hard time in grief, and I would say, tell me about the funeral. Tell me about, you know, where your loved one is, not spiritually, but physically, where's their body? And they would go, oh, they're on the bookshelf, their ashes. We haven't figured out whether to have a funeral or not. And I'll go, you made it optional. You know, it's 2 years and they're sitting without a ceremony. No wonder it's confusing for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to ask an unfair question here.
Go ahead.
Well, I apologize to you before I ask it because you've got so many wonderful exercises and elements in the workbook. Is there is there a most powerful one? Is there a most important one? I guess that's kind of like asking, do you have
Well,
who's your favorite
yeah.
kid? Yeah.
Right. I would say, you know, I have sections of them because I think the first part of the book is obviously about realizing and understanding grief to help you.
Mm-hmm.
The next part is about excavating your pain. And then I really love towards the end, it's about the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And many of us have, you know, read the hero's journey. It's how we've all gone into the dark night, whether it be Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or a million movies, you know, Lion King and all that. And there often begins with a death.
Right.
And then what happens is we have to go into that dark night. That's our grief. And I have people do their own hero's journey to realize through it all, we become the heroes of our own lives.
Did writing the book and the workbook, how did doing that for you, did it change your own perspective about grief and grieving and the grieving process? I mean, you were already renowned expert in this area. And I'm just wondering if this wonderful book and workbook changed your perspective any.
I think one of the things it did is it just really helped me understand myself better.
Hmm.
And I think that's all we can ever hope, is to sort of get in touch with ourselves, our true nature, and understand ourselves just a little better.
You kind of touched on this earlier, but I think it's important. We got about a minute left. And people who, after a loss, they experience, and this can even happen at the wake and the funeral, you start reminiscing, and you laugh and you experience joy, and then immediately you get guilty. What do you say to people who say, I'm guilty about having joy or happiness after loss?
I will say, guilt is a common companion in grief, and we have to really address it and understand it. And, here's one of the secrets to this, is our mind would always rather feel guilty than helpless. Our mind wants to find some control that it maybe can think of, oh, if only I wouldn't have done that, they'd still be alive. And it's a false way of getting control.
Yeah. That's powerful.
It is.
That's very powerful. Whole book is powerful. Whole workbook is powerful. You got to get it. I'd recommend you to get it through grief.com. It's Finding Meaning Workbook, The Sixth Stage of Grief, David Kessler. It's Tools for Releasing Pain and Remembering Love. And we all need that. We can use more of that in our world.
Absolutely.
We'll be back to wrap up our conversation today with David Kessler, right here on Strategies for Living. You're going to see the difference. When you go to Azalea Cleaners, you'll hear about it too. Azalea Cleaners has been fine dry cleaning since 1958, plus laundry, alterations and repairs, comforters, wedding gown cleaning and restoration. You'll hear about it from your friends because they'll see it too. They'll notice the Azalea difference. Azalea is convenient. 732 Azalea Drive, 9220 Ellerby Road, and 9227 Mansfield Road. Plus, the front door of your home or business with Azalea's delivery on demand. Just text SETUP to 249-8283, and Azalea will pick up your clothes and deliver them back clean and fresh to you. You can't get closer than that. That's the Azalea difference. You'll notice it right away. Others will too. The Azalea difference. Fine dry cleaning since 1958. Text SETUP to 249-8283 and get the Azalea difference. AzaleaCleaners.com. And welcome back. Welcome back into Strategies for Living here on 101.7 FM, 710 Keel. Lauren Leon McMillan, David McMillan with David Kessler today. The book is Finding Meaning Workbook, The Sixth Stage of Grief and Tools for Releasing Pain and Remembering Love. You can click through grief.com and buy the book.
David, thank you so much for your work. I know I've got a new resource for my clients, but what do you hope readers will take away from finding meaning in the workbook? How do you hope it will impact their lives and their healing?
I hope it will be a starting place, an easy place to feel like they can just privately, people talk about these days, do your grief work. And people are like, well, what's my grief work?
Yeah.
I hope that the book is a way for them to do their grief work and to begin it. And to, some folks may need more resources. And there's lots of groups out there, whether it's my Tender Hearts group or your local church or hospital. But, get some help this time. I joke with people. I have a maintenance plan on my tires. So, get some support in this hard time in your life.
Yes. Yes. Well, David, I hope that I hope we haven't overworked you today. You've been a great life strategist, and I hope you won't be a stranger. I hope you'll come back and visit us. This is such an important topic. I hope you'll come back and visit us again. And folks, thank you. Thank you for being a part of Strategies for Living. Get David Kessler's wonderful new workbook, Finding Meaning Workbook, Tools for Releasing Pain and Remembering Love. You can get there through grief.com. And thank you for being with us here on Strategies for Living. We appreciate our sponsors making it possible. The Robinson Film Center and Azalea Cleaners and Pintail Roofing and Learning RX and the Balanced Life Wellness Center. If today were the last day of your life, you only had one more phone call that you could make, who would you be calling? And what would you say? And why are you waiting? Make the call. For David Kessler and for Lauren Leon McMillan, I'm David McMillan. See you next time right here on Strategies for Living.